Welcome to Rich Conversations. Last week I read Being Mortal by Atal Gawande. I think that's how you say his name. But I didn't post the episode because I felt it was either very relevant or inappropriate with the coronavirus situation going on, and I couldn't decipher which one of those it was. So I sided with caution and did not post it. The book Being Mortal is, as you can imagine, about death. But it's really about empathizing with those who are dying. Modern medicine can only do so much. And so Gawande writes about the history of caring for the elderly, the creation of nursing homes, and the evolution of assisted living. It's a good book. I think it's a very useful book. I just didn't post about it. This week's book is quite a 180 from that. It's Trout Fishing in America by Richard Brautigan. My book selections aren't necessarily organized. I do have a Google spreadsheet with a list, but I don't follow it. My reading journey is more about flow and connecting ideas. And so whatever I'm most passionate or curious about in the moment usually ends up what I read. And so this last weekend, I was on a long drive to rural Illinois. And along the way, I started listening to the audiobook Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. And I didn't know much about Steve Jobs other than he started Apple and created these user-friendly products and technologies that have obviously revolutionized the world. But I was fascinated by his upbringing in Silicon Valley. It's interesting to me how impactful who we're around and our geography really shapes who we are and what our interests become. So he's in the suburbs of San Francisco, and families are working at electronic companies. And he's near the action and the culture of San Francisco during the 1960s. It clearly plays a large role in his life. In his coming-of-age years, he was into drugs, meditation, Eastern spirituality, all of that. And I just kind of wanted to know more about the geographical area and the experience of San Francisco. And I thought about the book on my shelf, Trout Fishing in America. I first heard about this book while bartending. Someone, I don't know who, mentioned it to me, and it's kind of a cult classic. During my trip to Paris in January, I stopped at the Shakespeare Company, which is this famous bookstore, and everybody when they learned I was going to Paris told me to go there. And so when I did, there were crowds of people, mainly young women, taking photos of it. And I've never been shoulder to shoulder in a bookstore before. Bars many times, but not bookstores. So that was kind of a cool experience. Trout Fishing in America was the first book that caught my eye. It was like right when you walked in. So I bought it and I intended to read it someday. And it happened that this last weekend is when I read it. And that's kind of how my reading journey has been. I just kind of get ready and have books on hand that I think I'll be interested in. And then the universe just tells me when to read it, Trout Fishing in America is a weird book. Super weird book. It's not something I would read normally. And I didn't necessarily even like it, but I do appreciate it. And I get new ideas and insights because it's so different. How do I describe it? There's no plot. Trout Fishing in America means a bunch of different things. It's like a character, a hotel, the actual act of fishing, and a bunch of other things. And the chapters, though, take place in the Pacific Northwest, San Francisco, and camping in Idaho. What interests me most is the background behind it. Steve Jobs was influenced by the drugs and San Francisco culture in the 1960s, and Richard Brautigan was living in San Francisco during that time. And apparently he wore like old-timey clothes and this large Western hat that would make you think he was like a man from a different time. And he wasn't quite a hippie, but he wasn't quite a beatnik, and he was kind of like his own thing. And Trout Fishing in America is abstract and surreal. It feels like it was written by a smart person who didn't care much about the world, but decided to write a book about not caring about much in the world to show how smart he was. And it's like an attitude that acknowledges so many people put forth effort to change the world, but meanwhile, he's going to go out and live his life and not take the world too seriously. I enjoy the nature aspects of it too, like placing myself in a Western landscape and out by the creek. It has this type of masculinity that I don't find often in novels, or at least the novels I've read. It's a short read. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's different, which makes it kind of refreshing at the same time. I would just read it to make yourself think about whether you liked it or not, and then reflect on then why you liked it or not. I think that'd be interesting. Thanks for listening to Rich Conversations. Social distance yourself and wash your hands.